Welcome to your show, Savannah.
Thank you, Lee. Welcome to today's Halloween episode.
For those of you who are listening only on audio,
You're missing out.
the way I listen, you're not getting to experience what I'm experiencing here in the room and what those of you watching on video getting to experience, and that is that Savannah is dressed up for Halloween.
As a cat.
As a cat. And so I'm having a very difficult time looking her in the eye and taking seriously anything that she might want to talk about.
Such a serious topic today.
Yes.
Literally, we're talking about death.
Yeah, and here she is as a cat.
And you have to look at me like this.
This is so ridiculous.
I do have a surprise for you, though.
No. Okay, I'm going to do this just for a moment, just for the camera.
No, you have to wear it for the episode.
I'm not going to leave this on for the whole episode.
You look so precious.
I look like an idiot.
Lee, I have to take a picture. You really do look precious, and you should wear this for...
I look like an idiot, I say to the camera.
Can you see yourself?
I know, I'm just letting the people on the camera know that I know I look like an idiot.
I'd be thrilled if you wore it the whole time. You don't have to.
Yeah. As soon as it gets serious, it's coming off.
Okay, yeah. As soon as I actually kind of see what you're saying now that I'm looking at you, hearing you talk about...
Imagine if I had black stuff on my nose and whiskers drawn on my cheeks.
Yeah, but that's what Halloween's all about, you know? Were you allowed to celebrate growing up?
Yes.
And what were some traditions? What were some hot outfits that you wore?
Hot outfits and me as a boy, as an adolescent boy, those things never went together.
By hot, I mean, like, what are the ones that stand out in your mind?
I think I was a skeleton one time.
Nice.
Yeah. But that's the only one I think I remember.
And when you raised your kids, you were pro Halloween with them too? Like you guys went trick-or-treating and whatnot?
We always enjoyed the communal aspects of Halloween, yes. Yeah. I enjoyed the prankster playing that especially went with Halloween when I was in high school.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
You were a prankster?
I was a serious prankster.
Can you name an example?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I can, but I'm not going to.
Okay.
Because
I mean, are we talking like TPing, or are we talking about like...
Oh, we did plenty of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But no, there was more stuff that you could have got. These days, you would get in a lot of trouble for.
Okay.
So I
Robust pranks.
I would never even tell my boys about some of these things because I thought they would emulate them. And I didn't want them to get in the huge amounts of trouble they could get in if they did my pranks.
That's valid.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah. So in honor of everyone's families that is listening, I will not recount my pranks.
Yeah, you don't want to set up the next generation for failure.
We want to be family friendly here.
Be
family friendly.
He says with velvet and cat ears. I love it. You're a good sport for keeping your ears on.
Yeah.
Well, in honor of Halloween, I came up with this brief of talking about death, which is so dark, but I think will be good for spooky season. Ears off, everyone. No, I'm going to keep my ears on. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, let's start the show.
Poetry has the power to connect our inner universe and the outer world. I'm Maggie Smith, poet and host of The Slowdown, a podcast from American Public Media. Each weekday, find time to take a breather from your to-do list, or doom scrolling for that matter, and take in a moment of reflection with a hand-picked poem. Listen to The Slowdown wherever you get podcasts.
David, can we talk about how often you end up having food delivered when you swear your fridge is full of food?
Sissy, I'm not proud of it, but last week I went through a drive-thru for dinner on my way home from the grocery store.
That is a special kind of irony. I get it, though. Some days you just need something easy without sacrificing all your good intentions.
Exactly. That's why Kachava has been a total game changer for me this fall. It's real nourishment that actually tastes good. No more overpriced spinach wraps that leave me hungrier than before.
With every 2 scoops of Kachava, you get 85 plus superfoods, nutrients, and plant-based ingredients.
I have been loving the coconut acai flavor. Blend it with a little fruit and almond milk, and it's my favorite quick breakfast.
And it's backed with 25 grams of plant-based protein, plus fiber, probiotics, and enzymes to keep things moving.
No artificial flavors, colors, or sweeteners, just all the good stuff your mind and body crave for whole body health.
Your future self will thank you. Go to Kachava.com and use code RBG for 15% off your next order.
That's Kachava, Kachava.com, code RBG for 15% off.
Did you know 3 out of 4 U.S. homes have toxic chemicals in their tap water? Even though contaminated water looks clear, it could put you at risk for devastating health concerns, including fatigue, hormone disruption, cognitive decline, even cancer. Surprisingly, standard fridge and pitcher filters do little to remove most contaminants, and bottled water contains microplastics. So what's the solution? Introducing AquaTrue, the countertop water purifier tested and certified to remove 84 contaminants, including chlorine, lead, forever chemicals, and microplastics. Its patented 4-stage reverse osmosis system goes way beyond ordinary filters for pure, healthy water you can trust. No plumbing, no installation. AquaTrue has been featured in Business Insider, Popular Science, and named Best Countertop Water Filter by Good Housekeeping. Join 98% of customers who say their drinking water is cleaner, safer, and healthier. Go to AquaTrue.com now for 20% off your purifier using promo code NSE. AquaTrue even comes with a 30-day best tasting water guarantee. That's AquaTrue.com, AQUATRU.com. Promo code NSE.
Everyone, if you like what we're doing and you want to help us get the show in front of more people, do us a favor by following and rating us wherever you listen. Leave a review, give us 5 stars, hype us up. If you want to watch full video episodes and see my cat ears, for example, and see Lee wearing cat ears, then watch it on YouTube or Spotify. You can follow the show at The Subtext Show, me at Savannah_Locke, or Lee at Lee C. Camp. And if you have any questions or suggestions for the show, just DM us on Instagram at The Subtext Show. If you have any thoughts around Lee wearing cat ears every week, for example, the people deserve to have a voice.
Yes, feel free to DM Savannah.
And let me know.
And let her know.
And I will gladly send you screenshots. I will send them in an email PDF.
I bet you'll not get a single DM about me and cat ears.
You never... Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Okay, Lee. So let's talk about death. But first, let's talk about masculinity.
If that's not the most awkward intro ever, let's talk about death and let's talk about masculinity. Why are you picking on the men?
Well, I'm not picking on the men.
It sounded like it.
This is what happened. I watched this documentary on Netflix called Untold, The Liver King. Have you ever heard of The Liver King?
No.
Okay, so it's this guy named Brian Johnson who blew up, like was making millions and millions every month from selling supplements. He called them like ancestral supplements. But he got famous as the Liver King because he basically would only eat meat, but he ate like every single part of the animal, including the liver and like different organs.
Was he eating this cooked or raw?
Raw. Raw organ meat.
Raw organ meat.
Dead serious. Raw organ meat. So he was eating raw organ meat and blew up on social media because he's like this really fit and buff guy. And he was saying that he was fit from these ancestral tenets, including eating raw organ meat, getting sunlight, doing certain types of workouts. And basically this documentary talks about his downfall because people were like, this guy is on steroids. Like, he has to be on steroids. And people would constantly say that. And he categorically denied it and was like, no, it's all from these ancestral supplements that I'm taking and from eating raw meat and working out and being a man. Like, that's basically his whole idea is like, I was always picked on growing up. My dad wasn't around and I had to teach myself to be a man. And like, now I'm this man and it has nothing to do with steroids. But then in 2022, it gets leaked that he was taking $11,000 worth of steroids every month.
$11,000 worth of steroids every month.
Every month of performance-enhancing drugs. So this documentary basically shows that and then his downfall, and now he's like rebuilding his brand, which is really interesting. But this got me thinking about different takes on masculinity and how this take on masculinity might revolve around a fear of death.
Well, I will be interested to see how you draw that line.
I know, same, actually.
Yeah.
Very curious about my own self. Have you noticed any of these like kind of like masculine, like hyper fitness related kind of things? And what thoughts do you have around that? And what it says about masculinity in our cultures.
Well, yes. I mean, I remember just in the last month, we got some listener mail on No Small Endeavor from a man that I think he said was in his 70s, and he said he's out in Hawaii now, and he was noticing that all of the young men are much more muscular than they were when he was young. And that he was just wondering aloud about how that relates to notions of masculinity that he didn't have to grow up with and that he didn't have as a boy. I mean, clearly there's lots of stuff, I mean, and I'll say that, if you look at the amount of time I spent doing weight training when I, for the first, let's say 40 years of my life, then I probably beat the total of 40 years of that kind of stuff every 6 months now. And so I do a whole lot more of that stuff than I ever used to do. But in my mind, it's there's all sorts of fascinating research around strength training, bone density, aging, the way it relates to aging, and the way it relates to what you're going to be able to do when you're older, that it's worth paying a lot of attention to. So I don't see it necessarily as toxic in any way necessarily. But obviously questions around masculinity and what we mean by what it means to be masculine is a very fraught question with lots of open questions in my mind, and I think everybody's mind.
Agreed. Yeah, it's not a binary.
Yeah.
It's like good probably to work out and keep your bone density and whatnot. But then there's also like this piece of being this like massive buff, like he would walk around shirtless and wear like this like animal tail from his head. And that is not all that it means for every man to be a man. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And to come up with that as the ideal or as the one path or whatever, it does seem like it could lead to some toxic results.
For sure. Yeah.
And it just got me thinking, too, about with this guy, Brian Johnson, the Liver King. First of all, his biggest audience was on Twitter. Fascinating cultural data point, in my opinion. And then second of all, it towards the end especially revolved around his relationship with his boys and how for him, like, he feels... And, there's like some grifter parts to this where I think that the documentary like was criticized in some ways for not pointing out that he was in a lot of ways a grifter, like selling all these supplements while taking steroids himself. So that's one piece that was not necessarily named in the show. But I do think there was a part of him that really believes that he's like helping his boys to survive in the world by making them eat this liver meat and work out and get really big and have all of these muscles. And so I think that it is a part of masculinity that he has maybe amplified to the millionth degree and made it the only thing. Because, like, for example, he obviously doesn't have honesty, like, because he lied all of those years, which probably comes from, like, a shame issue. And, like, maybe the emotional intelligence piece could be worked on and, like, the compassion, empathy, and whatever. And those, I think, too, are part of what it means to be masculine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the... two things immediately come to my mind that I think are of utmost importance in this conversation. One is that a lot of the times when I hear people say things about what it means to be masculine, I think that, well, isn't that also what it means to be a woman?
Hello?
And it's like, don't we want women to figure out what works well for them in, say, preserving bone density? And if that looks like lifting weights, then well, good. Then go for it, right? And so it's like, so many of these questions are not about what it means to be a man. It's about what it means to be a human. And so I think that's worth saying over and over and over again. I keep thinking that so many of the times I see people talking about we have to teach our young men what it means to be a man, that they again are talking about questions that virtue traditions teach us everybody ought to be concerned with, right? So we've lost the logic and the understanding of virtue traditions in the Western world. And so we don't, I'll teach my students the cardinal virtues and they don't even know what they are, right? But if you'd been done any kind of education 500 years ago, you would have known the four cardinal virtues are courage, prudence, temperance, and justice. And you would have known one of the most important things you're going to do with your life is to develop courage, prudence, temperance, and justice. And if you're in the Christian tradition, faith, hope, and love, along with those, right? And so Do we need our young men to grow in courage? Absolutely. Do we need our young women to grow in courage? Absolutely, right? But these are human questions. They're not masculine or feminine questions. And I think it will spend a lot more time focusing upon the things that we as humans need to develop. That there still are going to be some things that you have to think about. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be someone with what the scientific literature calls the DSDs, right? Where there's these, a percentage of people that don't develop sexually like, stereotypical man or stereotypical woman does. What's it mean to be an embodied person with the particular body that you have, and that's different than other people, right? My body's different than your body and all other women, right? And yours than mine. And that means that we have particular things that we do have to ask ourselves questions about. Are there particular things that I need to attend to? Are there particular things I should avoid? Are there particular health questions that I ought to be mindful of? Are there particular things about what it means to me to be a cisgendered man? Yes, of course there are.
Yes.
And so we don't need to be apologetic for that.
Yeah.
But the bigger questions are, what does it mean to be human? And if we'll spend more time focusing on what it means to be human, I don't think all this other stuff has to be quite so freighted.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Things are very gendered at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which we'll talk about in a future episode, goes to the culture war piece too, where I think that gender has become a culture war.
Yeah, for sure.
Where instead of actually being able to get below what we're actually trying to talk about, we use gender as an excuse to further divide.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And I think that that's what a lot of this might be speaking to too.
Right. Yes.
Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that.
I saw you thinking,
and
I was like...
Well, I mean, I think that the way I think about the culture war stuff about gender, just in terms of a continuum, I think that you have on, say... Well, it's common very quickly when you start talking about anything related to sex and gender, right? You have this notion that sex and gender are not the same thing. That sex is typically, for decades, seen as a biological category, whereas gender is a socially informed category of performative particularities that may or may not relate to sex, right? So as one of my colleagues told me, some years ago, look, Lee, if you were living 200 years ago or 250 years ago, then you would have been wearing pink and high heels, right? Yeah. Whereas now, I don't do that, and you might, right? Yeah. So sex and gender as two different categories, and I think that, on the far left these days, you have a sort of notion that even the notion of sex is seen as a performative or social construct,
right?
And then on the far right, you have these kind of presumptions about the way you are going to traditionally inform you. These are very rigid categories, and you're going to inform something like gender through very traditional, rigid categories. And then there's all sorts of spectrum in the middle. But it's all that stuff in the middle that's really interesting to think about. How do we think about these things more carefully without assuming that we have to have quite so much intransigence and quite so much hostility? Because there is a lot of gray in there that has to be navigated and sorted through, and it's not always obvious.
And it's not always obvious. How do you feel then about what people say, like I have some Scott Galloway stuff on here, where he does say that there is a modern masculinity problem. Like, how does that hit you, given the non-binary conversation we're trying to take around it?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding, and I have not dug into this very much, but I keep watching and listening and paying attention to stuff that comes out. But, my understanding is that that's true.
Yeah.
And that there's lots and lots of stats that show, quote, that young men are lagging behind in a lot of the markers of development.
Right.
And that it is causing a lot of pain and distress to young men. And so, I think that seems to be true. And, of course, you can get some kind of perhaps... I want to be careful the way I say this because it's a very fraught conversation, but I think that you can have some who will respond with a sort of like, well, cry me a river, it's time. That's too bad for them that they're having problems. And it's kind of like the way I think, and of course this is more difficult for me to say because I'm a man, right? But in my mind, empathy sympathy, let's use the word compassion, since compassion is not as strangely controversial, right?
Yes.
In my mind, one ought to strive to be compassionate regardless of who's suffering, right? And that, to the degree that I find people on the so-called progressive side of things convincing that there are systems and structures of power that bear down on people in unwitting ways, why would we be surprised that might not affect young men too, right? That there might be systems and structures that are now bearing down on young men. And so people would say, well, show me the evidence. And I'd say that too, right? Let's look at the evidence and see if that's true or not. But we ought to be able to investigate that and see if that's true. But at least a lot of the markers and indicators seem that there is a deep crisis for young men.
I'm happy you did talk about that because I know when Scott Galloway went on Dax Shepard's podcast, which was the first time I had heard of him, and this was several years ago, and Scott Galloway's whole thesis on this podcast was basically like, we need to start giving more assistance to young men. And this was like at least 2 years ago, so still a fairly unpopular time to have said that. And I remember, like, a lot of my progressive friends were like, what? Like, they're the opposite of the people that need to be having this help. But Scott, like, basically pointed to all of his research of, like, these high rates of depression and, like, because they're falling behind. And what he means by that is, like, a bunch of different things, like, in terms of, like, education. Like, they're less educated a lot of the times than women now and making less money than they blah, 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 blah. That women now don't see them as valuable prospects for romantic relationships. And then when men don't have the prospect of romantic relationships, the data does prove that they're not as good of citizens, employees, that they're more linked to anxiety and depression, et cetera. But I remember...
And the suicide successful suicide rates of men generally in the country is 4 times that of women.
Agree. Yeah. Well, I don't have to agree. It's just true. Yeah. But and he actually, I think, brought up that stat too. And I remember a lot of my friends still being like, well, sucks for them. Like, we've had to overcome so much or whatever in this whole thing. And I do remember being like, no, like, if this whole subset of people are sincerely struggling and that, like, it's leading to violence, because that's something else that Scott Galloway talks about, is how it will lead to violence. And it already has, then this is something that we need to talk about and potentially deal with.
Yeah.
Which is when we talk about modern masculinity problem, at least on the show, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Less of like this is what it means to be a man.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I find generally the whole sucks for them kind of approach rather off-putting, to put it most kindly, because it's like, I don't know. I want to be a human being who, and again, I say this I know that as a man and as a white man, I have had privileges that other people haven't had, especially given my age and the generation that I'm a part of. I know that I have had privileges because I'm a white man that other people didn't get, right? And I don't want to ever act as if that's not true. But I think that as a Christian and as a human being, one of the things that I thought that my faith required of me through these decades has been to never say it sucks for them. And always to say, well, to whatever small degree I can speak, act, or do for those who are under some sort of unfair weight, to lift that weight in some small way, then it's incumbent upon me to do that. Yeah. And I think that's regardless of who the group is, right? Yeah. If it's men, if it's women, if it's people of color, whatever it is, it's incumbent upon me first not to say it sucks for them as a way to dismiss it, but then to try to find some sort of small way I can contribute to lightening that load.
It's easy to know you want to make a change in your life, but it is hard to actually do it. How to Be a Better Human from TED is a podcast for when self-help feels too daunting or just not for you. I'm Chris Duffy, the host of How to Be a Better Human, and trust me, I do not have it all figured out. But join me as I talk to experts about actually attainable ways we can try to improve our lives. Whether it's facing fears, setting boundaries, cleaning your house, or all sorts of other topics. Find How to Be a Better Human wherever you get your podcasts.
I love the autumn. I just spent a weekend with a friend cutting and splitting firewood for the winter. With the days getting shorter, the summer chores fewer, and the fall colors on their way, everything seems to be slowing down. Just delightful. And then in the midst of all those creature comforts are yet another, our new Bowl and Branch signature sheets. Yes, those Bowl and Branch signature sheets are buttery soft, breathable to sleep in, and made with the highest quality 100% organic cotton in durable designs, and come with a 30-night worry-free guarantee. We are indeed having no worries and a great deal of delight with our new Bowl and Branch sheets. So start building your sanctuary of comfort this fall with Bowl and Branch. For a limited time, get 20% off your first set of sheets plus free shipping at bowlandbranch.com/NSE. That's Bowl and Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/NSE to save 20% and unlock free shipping. Exclusions apply.
Yeah, I love that. I agree with that. Yeah, and the reason I wanted to bring up the Scott Galloway thing before we got into the conversation around death is to show that, like, yes, there is a modern masculinity problem, and that's not what Liver King is solving. Like, everyone going and getting buff and whatever is not going to solve necessarily, like, that problem. And in my theory, and this is what I'm trying to posit in today's episode, is that Liver King is less about masculinity and more about avoiding death. That's my grand theory. So, like, while the Scott Galloway stuff is, like, one subset of, like, a real masculinity problem, I think that what Liver King is trying to solve is not, like, his own masculinity. I think it's some probably childhood wounds and then also the fear of death.
Yeah, it very well could be. But I would like to make a perhaps counterintuitive argument for a moment.
Please do. So let's get into it.
So I grew up very geeky, in a family of athletes, and I was never an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And I was terrible at anything related to athletics. You know, my hand-eye coordination horrible, my strength terrible, my ability to do anything related to sports abysmal.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I was in a family of camp men who were all very good at that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was the geeky one who cared about books and who cared about reading, who cared about playing the piano and all that kind of stuff. And it was not until, and I had some really negative experiences in trying team sports when I was a kid. Horrific experience playing Little League Baseball, for example. It's a story for another day. But some horrific experiences that were just, very unenjoyable and were not helpful in my formation as a human being. But that being said, years ago, when I was probably an early faculty member, first couple of years of being a faculty member, I read a book by a guy named Don Meyer. And Don Meyer was a famous basketball coach. And he was at one point one of the most winningest coaches in basketball in the country. He's a remarkable human being, very demanding, very good at what he did. And I read his memoir about being a basketball coach. And all of a sudden it hit me the way Don saw being a basketball coach was as a practice in moral formation of human beings. And it was a community by which he had much, and he actually taught at the same institution. I mean, he worked at the same institution for many years where I was teaching at the time that I read his book. And it struck me that Don had the capacity to form the young men he was working with in a much deeper way than I could as a faculty member in my classroom. And that it was an exercise in moral formation that was just kind of blew me away. And I was very taken by that. That was the first time I really saw, this is what sports is about at its best, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so when I think about any kind of thing, like whether it's weightlifting, whether it's playing basketball, any of that so-called stereotypical, male stuff, I want to say, well, yeah, that actually could help you become a better man. It really could. But at the same time, I'm going to go back to the other thing that I said, is that it also might help you become a better woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about moral formation. And so I don't want to get into this false place of having to downplay or poo-poo things that are stereotypically masculine, because they actually could be doing a lot of deep work in moral formation of human beings. But it's the moral formation question that's the preeminent question.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think there's plenty of room for that. I watch Friday Night Lights. I know what sports can do. Coach Taylor. Yeah. And that's, yes, because it's not a binary. Like, it can be a bunch of things at the same time. Yes.
Right.
And so it's not, this is, yes. And the way I initially set it up was, this is not about masculinity. It's about a fear of death, which is not necessarily true. It can be a bunch of those things. And there's also potential good things to eating raw organ meat.
Yeah.
Potentially.
But let's talk about fear of death.
Because and Mike Cosper talks about this on your show, but the piece of the masculinity thing that he talked about was essentially that, like, for all of these years, like, what it meant to be a man was, like, to be in service of others and protect others and, like, provide for others and whatever. And there's kind of been this shift in his view, and correct me if I'm not representing his view clearly, but there's been a shift in his view where now, like, men are all about, like, longevity. And, like, that Brian, I think his main name might also be Brian Johnson, the guy who does the Never Die stuff, where he's pouring $1 million every, like, few months into his own health so that he literally thinks he'll never die. Like, he wants to be immortal. And we have these men now moving into more, like, their own longevity and their own strength versus, like, that protection piece. Does that feel fair to what Mike Cosper was saying?
At best I recollect, yes.
Okay, nice.
That the shift is that earlier notions of masculinity might have been connected more with notions, say, of chivalry, where you're seeking out the good of people around you. It's a form of service and honoring. And now he's saying that it appears that masculinity is now more about self-centered development and formation as opposed to other-centering serving.
Yeah, service to self. Yeah, that's such a great, that's a clear way of putting it than what I did. And so when I'm thinking about maybe this transition of this, like, kind of new wave of masculinity, and this guy, once again, I'm going to make sure that it is Brian Johnson, who has this thing called Never Die. Yeah, Don't Die. It's called Don't Die by Brian Johnson. And he is pouring, like, so much money into keeping himself alive. But to me, that feels like he's just down the road of what a lot of people are doing. Like, he's the externalization of the end result of what a lot of these men are promising with their, like, longevity stuff. Not saying that there's anything bad with, like, taking care of your health. Obviously, there's, like, a lot of good in that too. Which that got me thinking with, like, the Don't Die, that got me thinking of Richard Beck.
Good old Richard Beck.
Oh my gosh.
I love Richard Beck.
Reviving Old Scratch was the first book I read by him. What does he call himself? A practical theologian?
I think that he uses that language for himself. Yeah, but he's a psychologist by training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Brilliant person, great writer. And he has this book called The Slavery of Death, where his overall position is essentially that in our current society, our obsession with things like longevity, success, wealth, fame is all done in an avoidance to recognize that we're going to die one day.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly...
You endorse the book?
It's certainly a very compelling premise.
It is a very compelling premise.
Yeah.
And when I was looking at it, once again, I was like, oh, I'm going to write a summary of this book for Lee. And then I looked at the endorsements and you had endorsed it. And I was like, I don't have to write a summary for Lee anymore because he already knows.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the whole notion of interrogating the ways that we are terrified of death and then wondering with ourselves and with our communities about what are we doing that is trying to cheat death is a conversation worth a lot of discernment.
Yes. So how do we deal with this fear of death? Well, first of all, let's back up. Do you agree that things like what I've been discussing, like this certain form of masculinity, could be in part due to a fear of death?
Well, I think if you have somebody that's saying, I want to never die, and they're doing all that kind of stuff, it seems pretty obvious that the answer in that case would be yes. Mm-hmm. And I think that, again, if you go back to a sort of virtue approach, Aristotle always reminds us that with most every virtue, not all of them, but with most virtues, there's a vice of too much and a vice of too little. And so if you, let's say, with just regard to one's physical health, if you pay too little attention to it, mm-hmm. then that seems to be vicious. And if you pay too much attention to it, that seems to be vicious. Mm-hmm. The question is, what's the virtuous space in which you rightfully attend to your body? and rightfully attend to questions of longevity and so forth. And I think that there is a place where that's the rightful thing to attend to. But it can also become a bondage. And it's not too hard to imagine the ways in which that bondage could be very much indebted to our terror of death.
Our utter terror of death.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I read this book once called The Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. Have you ever heard of it before?
No.
It's this gal who left her job to become a cremator. I don't know why I became obsessed with this book. I saw it at Barnes & Noble, loved the cover. And it talks a lot about death because, like, literally the opening, you would actually love this book. The opening few paragraphs is her first autopsy.
Huh.
Like, her first, like, watching it and preparing to basically cremate this person. Because you have to, like, basically go through all this training to learn how to do all that stuff. Okay, blah, blah, blah. But basically, some of her conclusions towards the end, now that she's very into death and sees it all the time, is, like, how her becoming a cremator was her learning to face her fear of death. And how even in our, like, funeral process and stuff, like, it shows our fear of death by, like, the way that we, like, embalm people and put the makeup on so that they don't look dead in all of these practices that have never been done before until us. And how, like, certain, like, the Disney, how he, like, has himself encapsulated because I think people still think that he can come back. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't know what it is, but basically, like, certain people have, like, actually put themselves into, like, ice chambers after dying because they, like,
cryogenics and all that stuff.
To try to come back. And for her, now her, like, new, like, life phase or whatever is becoming a death doula, where she, like, helps people die well and not be afraid of death, and then also learn to face their own mortality and let that be reflected in the death process. Yeah. Which I think is really interesting.
It's very interesting. I think that the way we go to such lengths to avoid death is just remarkable. And I've noticed, for example, since COVID, how increasingly common it is not to even have funerals. And it really, I see that as an immense loss. It's an immense cultural loss. It's an immense theological loss. That we should be very much deeply embedded in funerals in our communities. Yeah. And I would encourage anybody listening, to say, this is a gift that you can give us all, is that as you pass, make sure we have a funeral for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it helps us as a community to take seriously our death. So, yeah, I very much think that reinvesting in learning to face our mortality is crucial. And, in the Middle Ages, there were these, and one of my colleagues taught me this a number of years ago, who's an English lit guy, but, they would have these death manuals. And what they did was they taught you that your life, by and large, must be a preparation for learning to die well.
Yeah.
And, I think we would rather think in terms of, I'd rather die in my sleep. I don't want to have to think about my death. I don't want to be concerned with my death. I just want to act as if that's not a fact of life.
It's not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, it's one of the great passages, right, that we all will go through. So then the question becomes, okay, how do you remember that? And how do you prepare for that well?
Yeah. And in what ways am I avoiding it?
Right.
Like, what practices do I have that maybe, like, morally neutral practices, but what practices do I have that I'm participating in because I am afraid of my own death?
Yeah.
Like, I'm afraid to face the reality that I'm getting older.
Yeah.
Which, like, this goes to, like, we've been talking a lot about masculinity, but I think that there's also something to be said about, like, how much aesthetic procedures and Botox and stuff is on the rise. I'm curious if that has something to do with it too, where we're terrified of aging, which to me feels like a terror of death.
Yeah. Yes.
Like 20-year-olds are getting Botox.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you, I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah.
I'm not 20.
Well, men do too.
I'm not 20. And, the women seem to be doing it more than the men. So I don't think I want to speak into that. But I'll let you speak
Bradley
into that.
Cooper just got a facelift. This is going to show our divide. Sometimes I say things and I'm like, this just shows the gap between us. And Bradley Cooper getting a facelift and me being updated.
It's okay that you know that Bradley Cooper had a facelift.
And I do know this because I follow this guy who's like a plastic surgeon. And what he'll do is he'll look at, I don't know if he's a plastic surgeon. or if he just does like injectables. But he basically will go through different celebrities' faces and he'll be like, this is probably what they got done. And a lot of the times with facelifts, especially with men, you can tell behind the ears because of the scarring there. Anyways, Bradley has gotten like a bunch of work done. And I'm like, man, even the men are getting into it now too.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me. And, I think that, I find myself sometimes looking, especially in the last couple of years, where I feel like, I'm 58 and
feeling great.
I didn't feel my 50s until like this year. And then it's like this year I thought, oh, I'm in my 50s.
Yeah.
And I feel it in my energy levels and I am noticing it in wrinkles that I've gotten on my face that have shown up all of a sudden in the last year.
Yeah.
And you start to feel self-conscious about this stuff, right?
Totally, yes.
Right? And because that's what our culture does. But I think that the more we can lean into the beauty of aging and the beauty of what are they called? Crow's feet?
Crow's feet, yeah.
Crow's feet,
yeah.
And so forth and so on. The more liberated we all shall be. Is doing all that kind of stuff liberating or is it bondage? And I tend to think that it may be a deep form of bondage that we pay for.
That's what Richard Beck sort of argues. Like, he doesn't talk about injectables or whatever. I dare say he does not know that Bradley Cooper got a facelift, if I have to guess. Yeah, Richard Beck is too busy for that. But yeah, that's kind of what his argument is that we think that these things are keeping us safe from death, but it's actually keeping us in the slavery of death, of the fear of death.
Yeah. And
he basically talks about how, like, it's actually in embracing our own mortality and the promise of, like, things to come if you're a Christian and believe in that's the way to, like, basically be liberated from this bondage.
Yeah. I mean, for a long time, one of my favorite passages from the New Testament was from Hebrews 2, where he's talking about the crucifixion of Christ, the death of Christ. And he says, since therefore the children share flesh and blood, that is with Christ, he himself shared the same things, so that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by the fear of death. Mm-hmm. And it's like what he's describing there is a very different route, right, to freedom. And that is, if we want to be free, especially from this sort of consummate slavery that is our fear of death, then it comes through embracing that we are flesh and blood.
Yep. Yeah.
Through embracing that we're all going to face death.
Yeah.
Through embracing that someone dealt with death ahead of us.
Yep.
And has experienced new life, right? And so in many ways, this gets at the heart of faith, right? If one claims this sort of faith, then it does seem to me it ought to be transformative with regard to the ways in which we've oriented so much of our lives of trying to cheat death.
Yep.
And instead say, I still may be afraid of it, but at least I want to live in such a way so that I'm not just blindly enslaving myself to the fear of death.
Exactly. Yeah, you actually just basically said his book perfectly. The only piece that was missing from that is that he talks about, like, how there are hero systems is what he calls them. I think that's what he calls them. But hero systems which give us access to immortality. And so, like, religion can be a hero system, but more recently, like, work is a hero system, or legacy is a hero system. Or I think what I'm trying to get at a little bit is, like, I think aesthetics or, like, strength or beauty can be hero systems, where it's like, if we can kind of, like, access this youth through our looks, or access, like, the strength of youth, that can be a way that we feel immortal or something like that.
Yeah.
And maybe I could be wrong, but that's just kind of what he says about the hero systems, and that basically that keeps us enslaved to death, trying to access that apart from the embracing of it. But I wanted to read this quote because it basically says what you just said. He says, in contemporary American culture, our slavery to the fear of death produces superficial consumerism, a fetish for managing appearances. Oh, I guess he does talk about appearances, but although he could have meant reputation with that. Inauthentic relationships, triumphalistic religion, and the eclipse of personal and societal empathy. These are the works of the devil in our lives, works produced by our slavery to the fear of death. And then he goes on to say later, And this goes to a little bit of what you were saying, which I was hearing about, like, we're afraid, I think, in some ways of vulnerability and how that can actually be a rebellion of, like, in a good way. Like, if we want to free ourselves from the bondage of death, we can learn to be vulnerable with each other. Okay, this is what he says. We are neurotic about being vulnerable with each other. We fear exposing our need and failure to each other. And because of this fear, the fear of being needy within a community of neediness, the witness of the church is compromised. A collection of self-sustaining and self-reliant people who are all pretending to be fine, is not the kingdom of God. It's a church built upon the delusional anthropology we described earlier. Specifically, a church where everyone is fine is a group of humans refusing to be human beings and pretending to be gods. Such a church is comprised of fearful people working hard to keep up appearances and unable to trust each other to the point of loving self-sacrifice. Unfortunately, where there is no need and no vulnerability, there can be no love. That's
a great word. Well said, Richard Beck. It reminds me of, this is the second or third time I've mentioned it, but reading Laura Love Hardin's book, The Many Lives of Mother Love, of Mama Love. And she talks about one of the things that took her down that, led her to horrific heroin addiction and jail time and, potentially losing everything in her life was that she could not admit she wasn't perfect. And she was trying to be the perfect mother in suburban California. And that she couldn't imagine saying to people, I have a problem and I need help. And because she wouldn't say, I have a problem and I need help, it kept spiraling down until she's arrested and her kid's taken right out of her arms and she's stuck in jail. And so I think that's one of the great ironies, right? It's not like by pretending that we're perfect, therefore we'll get a leg up on everybody else who's vulnerable. It's like, no, that will screw you over.
It will, yeah.
And at some time or the other. And so it's better that we could learn more quickly to practice vulnerability, to embrace our mortality, embrace our finitude, and just admit that we're human beings, and we're human beings of all of whom are going to die, as the sort of consummate expression of our finitude and mortality. The faster we can get there, the more liberated we can be.
Yeah. Dang, that's really good. That book sounds really good.
Yeah, it's a great book. That's
the first time that you've said anything from the inside of the book. Like, it's always just been, like, about the title. And so now I'm, like, very bought in.
Yeah.
I kind of want to read it.
Very helpful.
Yeah. Then I think that that's a good way to maybe notice. First of all, I think people know that they're afraid of death if they're literally just afraid of death. So that could be, like, one way to identify it, like, on a practical note. I personally think about death all the time. I have since I was a little kid. I don't know, like, it's very on the forefront of my mind a lot, like the reality that I'm going to die, that people I love are going to die. But I think that can sound morbid to people who are not used to thinking about that. But that could even be, like, a good practice.
Yeah.
And then if you do notice that you are afraid of death, so normal. And what are some ways that maybe you can start embracing your own mortality that are helpful and maybe could potentially shake off some of the bondages that you have to the fear of death?
Yeah.
I hear one that we're naming is vulnerability and, like, naming your neediness. But then another one, like, I think what you were talking about where you're like, I noticed my own wrinkles. Noticing that you're aging.
Yeah. Right.
That's another one.
That's right. And being okay with it.
What are some others?
This conversation reminds me of the interview we did with Oliver Berkman, who's an Englishman, has this wonderful book called 4,000 Weeks. And he talks about the way in which we try to use productivity techniques as a way to kind of escape our mortality because we think we can do more and more and more and more. And all it does is the faster you get your email done, it just means that more people put email in your inbox.
You're exactly right.
You know? And so instead, it's a very beautiful kind of meditation upon just accepting this reality about ourselves. And rather than asking why things are the way they are, instead to try to find your way into meditating upon the beauty of the fact that things are. And I had this kind of beautiful experience in reading his book, sitting one day in a tap room that unfortunately here in town has closed down. But I remember sitting there reading his book, drinking a beer, and just looking around the room thinking, it's amazing that we're all here and that we're drinking this stuff that people have put so much love and craft into, and people are talking to their friends. and that we're all alive. And it's amazing. You know, all of life is on a knife's edge, and it could all be gone just like that.
It really could, yeah.
And so just to lean into the beauty of life and the beauty of existence and the beauty of our friends and the beauty of our family and the beauty of the work that we get to do in the world, and just keep leaning in, and accept that beauty.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I love that. That feels like the best place to end, because where I was going to go was darker, so.
In your cat face.
Oh, put on your cat ears to end the show.
Only to end the show, yes. Okay. There we go.
All right, you have got 2 cats signing off after talking about masculinity, death, and feline courage.